Some breaking Philadelphia 76ers news to get to here on this Saturday, June 29th, the eve of NBA free agency, which does begin tomorrow night at 5 o'clock Eastern time when teams are able to start negotiating with teams. And then a little bit after that, those deals will then become official. And obviously on the Sixers front, there's been plenty of buzz behind the Sixers utilizing the most cap space in the NBA to build around Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. We're going to talk about one particular target on today's show, and that is Paul George. He just declined his player option with the Los Angeles Clippers, and the Sixers expected to actively and aggressively pursue him once free agency begins tomorrow night. This is Philadelphia 76ers Now by Chat Sports. I'm Chase Sr. Make sure you hit that subscribe button for year-round Sixers content and coverage, because regardless of where I am, at the Chat Sports Studios or at the home studio, whenever there's a big juicy rumor, a big report, developing news or breaking news, I can't help myself. I love the grind. Got to hop in front of the camera, get on this microphone, and talk some Sixers. So let's do it. Chris Haynes, NBA Insider, just reporting moments ago here on Saturday afternoon that Clippers star Paul George is declining his $48.8 million player option, and what that leads to, him becoming an unrestricted free agent. That's great news for Philadelphia because now they can sign him to a deal in free agency. It wouldn't have to be a sign and trade in which you have to give him money and then give the Clippers some assets. So that was the first part of the breaking news just a few minutes ago. And then Chris Haynes quote tweeted that report and gave us a follow-up. Philadelphia 76ers are expected to aggressively pursue Paul George, and they are a legitimate threat in luring the star away from Los Angeles. Let me explain why I think this is worth taking seriously and why I think this is pretty notable. There are always reports this time of year. There are always rumors this time of year. And there's always chatter about this team being interested in a player or a player being interested in the team. But I always think that in a pinch, a day before free agency like this, when it's coming from Chris Haynes, who has good relationships with players, when he says and uses the verbiage, are expected to aggressively pursue and they are a legitimate threat in luring the star away from Los Angeles, I think that you take some stock in that. I think that Philadelphia has a realistic shot of landing Paul George. Would it be a good move or a bad move? We can, of course, talk about that in the upcoming minutes. That's the national angle. But then there's the local angle as well, on top of why I think you should take this seriously. John Clark, NBC Sports Philadelphia, saying, source confirms that the Sixers are expected to pursue free agent to be Paul George starting tomorrow evening. And there was another team that was said to be very interested in PG-13. That was the Golden State Warriors. But given their financial situation and given their roster situation, the Warriors' most likely path of landing Paul George was going to have to be a sign and trade. They were going to have to give up assets like a Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, Andrew Wiggins, maybe some draft picks involved, and they have draft picks at their disposal, but they were going to have to match some salaries and send those salaries out in order to be able to absorb and take on the Paul George contract, and they were willing to give him, according to reports, a 4-year max. But now that Golden State can't sign and trade for Paul George because he opted out of the player option, he's becoming a free agent, it looks as though that ends their pursuit of Paul George. John Dickinson reporting this effectively ends the Warriors' pursuit of George this summer. They would have needed him to opt in and demand a trade to Golden State. He will now test free agency, either re-sign with the Clippers or go to a team with the cap space to pay him. The Sixers, and this is side news, have also declined the option of Jeff Dowtin, so he's going to become a free agent. This does open up a roster spot, and that is important for Philadelphia because they're trying to fill out this roster, and they don't have a lot of players on their current team who are actually under contract. Joel Embiid, Ricky Council, Paul Reed, and Jeff Dowtin. Those were the players who were under contract for Philadelphia. Tyrese Maxey, a restricted free agent, but he's going to receive that max. So now that they declined the player option for Jeff Dowtin, he becomes a free agent, opens up another roster spot, and Daryl Morey pretty much has a clean canvas right now to make this roster as he sees fit, or put it together as he sees fit. And why Philadelphia is considered to be serious threats for Paul George, they have $58.3 million in cap space. That can go up to $72 million. They can give Paul George a max. They can sign him to a 4-year, $212 million deal. That's more than what the Los Angeles Clippers can give him. The Sixers give Paul George a really good basketball situation, which I know he's from the West Coast. I know he's comfortable in Los Angeles. It's a different breed playing in Philadelphia culturally. The intensity of the fan base, especially when you've been playing with the Clippers, when there really isn't a fan base for the Clippers. It's kind of a joke. And the scene in the arena is nothing like the Wells Fargo Center in South Philly when it's popping. But not only can the Sixers give Paul George a max deal, 4 years, $212 million. I get it. There are risks with the injuries, with him being in his mid-30s. We'll talk about the player here in a second. But for Paul George, he gets the bag, and he enters a really good basketball situation. Nick Nurse is an excellent head coach. Tyrese Maxey is a blossoming superstar. He's arrived. You know what you have in Joel Embiid, and when he's able to stay healthy, he's a top 3 player in the NBA. And the trio of Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, Paul George, in addition to Daryl Morey utilizing the rest of that cap space to put together a really good team, that gets you in the mix in the Eastern Conference. Now, of course, you're still going to have to get over the hurdle of that second round, which the Sixers haven't done since 2001, and it's been incredibly disappointing, frustrating, and maddening, but at least you're in the mix. The New York Knicks have drastically improved. Mikal Bridges trade, bringing back OG Anunoby. Jalen Brunson is a dog. It's the New York Villanova Wildcats, right? The Boston Celtics are the reigning NBA champions. The Milwaukee Bucks are going to be more interesting with Giannis and Dame. The Cleveland Cavaliers, Orlando Magic, those are teams that at least have to be monitored. But Philadelphia would be considered a top 3 team in the East alongside Boston and New York. And it sets up a really, really fun Eastern Conference outlook. And so for Paul George, good basketball situation and a good financial situation. As far as the fit goes, think about this. And I know that people are worried about giving Paul George that amount of money at his age with the tread on the tires and the injury concerns. You are upgrading from Tobias Harris to Paul George. Think about that. And think about how big of an upgrade that is on both ends of the floor. So while Paul George is older and there are concerns with paying him, the upgrade from Tobias Harris to Paul George is massive. So that's what I want people to think about. People have also said stop paying older players. And I get that. But the goal is to try to chase a championship over the next 2 years, 3 years. Realistically, with how old Joel Embiid is. Post Joel Embiid and post Paul George potentially, you still have a young Tyrese Maxey who you can build around. Maybe a Jared McCain, an Adem Bona. They can develop. And then once those players get off the books or you free them somehow off this roster, you're going to have a lot of cap space with Tyrese Maxey. And again, the goal is to compete and win a championship over this next 2 to 3 year window. That's the objective. I'm not really worried about what's going to happen 5 years from now. You know that saying, what have you done for me lately? What can you do for me now? What can the Sixers do for me now? I'm tired of seeing first and second round exits. Paul George gives you an opportunity to win an NBA championship. And that's what I want to see. The Sixers as a legitimate, serious threat with the legitimate head coach, a great young player in Maxey, an MVP in Embiid, and a really good player in Paul George. He averaged more than a point per possession, 1.03 points per possession in isolation situations last year. That's 14th best in the entire NBA. 5th best among players who got 5+ isolation possessions per game. And so in the playoffs, what did Daryl Morey say after the season that he wanted? A wing who could score and defend. That is literally Paul George. And so every given night in a playoff series, the opposing team and defense has to plan for Maxey, who's lightning quick and can score from all three levels. Crafty finisher around the rim, has the floater game, the step back three, and the range. Joel Embiid, who can score at all three levels, also dominate the paint, shoot the three, great moves in the mid-range with touch. And then Paul George, who can score from all three levels. And if you round out this roster with other good veterans, you bring back Kelly Oubre, you bring back Nick Batum, Kyle Lowry / Campaign. You get a little bit from Jared McCain. Maybe you get something from Adem Bona. If not, you sign an Andre Drummond and you sign a KCP. This is what we've been waiting for. This is what we've been dreaming of. Having a Sixers team with this much cap space to take advantage of it. Now, if the Sixers flail and they swing and miss, they don't land Paul George and they can't land a wing, massive disappointment. But there's hope and there's traction behind the Sixers signing Paul George with free agency set to begin tomorrow. And I'm excited about the potential possibilities. I really am. So wanted to hop on the mic from the at-home setup here on 76ers Now to give you the latest breaking, developing news on Paul George. We're going to be going live tomorrow night on 76ers Now, an hour before free agency starts. So make sure you join us. Our free agency special is going to be awesome. When signings happen, we'll talk about them. When Sixers make moves, we'll break it down in a breaking news fashion. That's why you subscribe. Enjoy the rest of your Saturdays. Enjoy your Sundays, and we'll see you tomorrow night. Peace.